Hi, I'm Christine. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm here with some historical fiction recs that are on Kindle Unlimited. So I love historical fiction books. I have a whole playlist of historical fiction recs and different videos that I've done for historical fiction books. So I will link that below. I'm also a co-host for a historical fiction book club, which is Leave It to the Pros, where we read a historical fiction book every month and then have a YouTube live show where we chat about the books. So I'll link all those things below. I have 15 historical fiction books to recommend today that are on Kindle Unlimited. Quite a while back, somebody had asked me for a list of KU recs for historical fiction specifically. So I've slowly been compiling a list of ones that I have read that I also found on Kindle Unlimited so that I could do this video, and today I have 15 so far on the list, so I thought this would be the perfect time to do the hopefully first version of this. Maybe over time I will find even more KU historical fiction books to read. So yeah, in today's video I'm going to talk about 15 of them. As always, I'm going to link all the books, all the authors that I talk about down in the description of the video. Any of the books that I have read, I do review every book that I read, so my Goodreads is always linked in the description of the video as well, where you can see all of my book reviews for every single book that I read. So with all of those things out of the way, let's get into it. All right, so first up, we're going to talk about an author who seems to have a ton of books on Kindle Unlimited, but especially her historical fiction. So that is going to be Amy Harmon. This first book is What the Wind Knows. So this book is not only on Kindle Unlimited, it's also available with the Read and Listen feature, which means that if you download this book on Kindle Unlimited, have it out on your KU library for the entire time you have it checked out, you will also get the audiobook with it through Audible, which I love that fact about Kindle Unlimited. So anytime I can find some Read and Listen ones where you get the audiobook with it, I definitely grab them and I will let you know, because actually quite a few on this list are also available with the Read and Listen feature, which I love. So Amy Harmon definitely writes more of romances in her historical fiction books as well. Being a romance reader, I totally love and appreciate that as well, and I feel like she does it super well too. So in What the Wind Knows, this is a dual timeline. It's also a time travel romance, which I love. So this one starts off in the year 2001, and we see that the main character, Anne, she had a really special relationship with her grandfather, and he has recently passed away. And so growing up, she always loved his stories of Ireland, and so she's heartbroken by the loss of her grandfather, and so she decides to go to Ireland. So she's just surrounded by the places that her grandfather loved and the stories that he told her and just this rich history that's in Ireland, and then she finds herself swept through time. And so then we cut to the other timeline where it is now the 1920s, like 1921 in Ireland, and Anne is there, and it is the kind of height of the Irish rebellion kind of kicking up, and things go from there. I won't say too much else about this one, because honestly, if you just go in for the ride, it's so good, so emotional and heartwarming. I just really loved this one. Highly recommend. And like I said, it's on KU with the Read and Listen feature as well, so definitely go grab this one. All right, so next up, another one from Amy Harmon. This is Where the Lost Wander, and this one again is going to be available with the Read and Listen feature, so it comes with the audiobook as long as you check the book out from Kindle Unlimited. I read this book when it came out quite a few years ago and really loved it. This cover is just stunning, and so this book kind of follows the Oregon Trail, and so this book takes place in the US in the 1850s. I want to say 1853, yes. So in this one, we're following a heroine who is 20. She's been recently widowed, and now she's traveling with her family across the Midwest. Of course, it's very much those Oregon Trail times, so you see all of the struggles and strifes and the really big hardships that they face kind of traveling through these times. In here, in the author's note in the back, I remember that the author and her husband, I want to say her husband's family, maybe her family as well, they have some connections to people in the story that they either write about or that they were influenced by for the story. Very much a slow moving story, but I remember really liking this one. Maybe not quite as much as the previous one, but this one was really good as well. Next up is From Sand and Ash by Amy Harmon. So this is actually one of the ones that I have not read. So this one again is available with the Read and Listen feature. So you get that audiobook if you check out the book on Kindle Unlimited as well. So that's definitely what I'm going to do, because I feel like audiobooks help me get to a lot of these books sooner than later. So this one, I know I've heard good things about it over the years and have been meaning to get to it. It's a World War II historical fiction. And this one, it says it takes place in Italy in 1943. Germany occupies much of the country, placing the Jewish population in grave danger during World War II. And it says that as children, Ava and Angelo were raised like family, but divided by circumstance and religion. As the years go by, the two of them find themselves falling in love, but the church calls to Angelo, and despite his deep feelings for Ava, he chooses the priesthood. Ooh, okay. So then it says that we cut to a decade later. Now he's a Catholic priest, and she is a Jewish woman with nowhere to turn, and so she finds herself being sheltered by the Catholic Church. And so very interesting premise for this one. A a World War II historical fiction. Next up is The Briar Club by Kate Quinn. So this is actually, I mentioned I have a historical fiction book club. This was one of our picks for 2024. So this is a newer release from this author. It just came out in the summer of 2024 as well. This takes place during the 1950s in US history, and it takes place in Washington, D.C. at this boarding house where these women kind of group together and have a supper club, which is where the Briar Club name comes into play. So it's very much the McCarthy era. There's a lot of secrets. There are some murder mysteries to this one as well. I just remember immediately being pulled into the characters who are at this house. You kind of get a lot of different POVs. A murder happens pretty early on into the story, and I remember being super intrigued, like, why is there a body in the dining room? And so I needed to know more. And so it kind of goes from there, very much like all of that paranoia that was just present during the McCarthy era. Such a good one, and I just remember it being really enraptured by the powerful story of these women and their friendships and the secrets that they have. So yeah, definitely check out The Briar Club by Kate Quinn. So another one on Kindle Unlimited from Kate Quinn. Not all of her backlist is, but a couple of her books are. And so The Alice Network is one of those that is also on KU. This one I have actually not read yet, so I am very excited to get to it. This one I know is a lot of people's favorite from Kate Quinn. I think it's one of her older books, and maybe it was possibly turned into a movie. I can't even remember, but I feel like that was maybe the case. So this one, it says it is dual timeline. So we get 1947 in the chaotic aftermath of World War II, and we're following an American college student in Europe. And then the other timeline is 1915, so a year into the Great War, and we're following a different woman during that time as well. So very intriguing. I love reading books where we get dual timeline, and I feel like World War I and World War II, I don't personally read a ton where the same book has both of those timelines in it. So I'm very intrigued by that alone, and I definitely want to get to it sooner than later. Let me know if you've read this one or if you have any favorite book by Kate Quinn. I would love to know. All right, and then the last one from Kate Quinn that I recently read and loved it so much. This is Signal Moon by Kate Quinn. This is a Kindle Unlimited novella. So when you grab the book on KU, you get it with that read and listen feature again. So you get the audiobook with it. I did the audiobook and loved it. Like I said, it's a really short, just little bite-sized novella, but I was so pulled into the story. This one takes place during World War II, so it's 1943, and we're following this woman who was kind of a part of society. She was a young debutante, so she finds herself having to trade in her white gloves for all of the society parties and having to get an actual job. And so she ends up working for Bletchley Park. She ends up being somebody who wears headphones every day, and she gets to intercept naval communications and send those messages on to Bletchley Park for them to translate or decipher. And so one night she is doing her job, she's wearing her headphones, she is listening in for some communications, and she overhears this SOS call from a US Navy ship that is currently under fire, going down, and she's shocked that nobody else is getting this message, that nobody else has talked about it, and so she's trying to help the man whose voice she's hearing. And so it kind of goes from there of her trying to figure out where exactly he is and possibly when he is. So it goes from there. I don't want to say too much else. This one I was just in for the ride. Like I said, it's a novella. It's really, really short. Such a good one, especially the audiobook. I loved it on audio. So yeah, definitely check out Signal Moon by Kate Quinn. So another historical fiction novella is A Night at the Tropicana by Chanel Cleeton. I love Chanel Cleeton's books. I have a whole author guide to her historical fictions on my channel. I've read them all, so definitely go check that out. I'll link it in the description of the video. But for this video today, A Night at the Tropicana is a Kindle Unlimited novella that she has that is also available through Audible with the read and listen feature. So you'll get that audiobook if you download the KU book as well. I personally don't read a ton of historical fiction novellas, so when I'm able to find some, I definitely jump into them immediately. So if you have any historical fiction novellas I need to check out, definitely let me know in the comments below. So it's 1969, and we're following the heroine who is a successful doctor. She recently had a divorce, and so at the hospital where she works for, she's hosting this gala to raise money for the hospital. And so the theme of the party is A Night at the Tropicana, and so she starts reminiscing about when she was a young college student back in 1939, when she actually was in Havana with her family on vacation, and she ended up going to the opening of the Tropicana, which of course is a famed nightclub in Cuba. And so it kind of goes from there, where we see her as a young college student in 1939 in Cuba with her family, and then we cut to 1969 and we see how those two timelines kind of intersect and how things from then have affected her life going forward. Like I said, it's a really short KU novella. Highly recommend. Love the audio for this one. Next up is The Last Secret of Lily Adams by Sarah Blades. So this is another one that's available on KU with the read and listen feature, so you'll get the audiobook with the KU book when you read it. This one just came out, and I want to say the end of summer or early fall 2024, and so I read it and loved it. This one is a historical fiction mystery, and it's kind of set around the golden age of Hollywood. This one, again, we're getting dual timeline. So in present day, we're following the heroine. She is recently divorced. She has a teenage daughter, and her beloved grandmother has recently passed away. So she's at her grandmother's house kind of going through all of her things. Her grandmother was also a Hollywood starlet of the golden age, so in like 40s and 50s. And so her grandmother had wanted a lot of her personal items and her professional life items kind of donated to this Golden Age museum. And so her granddaughter is going through all of her things to kind of do that. And so she ends up coming across her grandmother's diary. And so she's talking about how she's kept a secret for years and that she really has to get off of her chest this story about this other woman who was another young Hollywood starlet at the time who was actually brutally murdered. And so it kind of goes from there. And the granddaughter in the present day, she's kind of shocked because her grandmother had never talked about this other woman. She didn't even know that they were in the same circle. And so it kind of goes from there where you get to see both of the timelines playing out at the same time. This one I really enjoyed. It was very fast paced and I felt like it just kept my interest the whole time through. Like I said, it comes with the audiobook, which I just love it for that fact alone. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one as well. So definitely check it out. Next up is Winter Garden by Kristen Hanna. So I love Kristen Hanna's historical fictions. I've read majority of her backlist, but this is actually one that I haven't gotten to. I actually didn't even realize it was historical fiction until I was recently reading the premise for it. And so this one is available with that KU read and listen feature. So again, you get that audiobook with it if you check it out on KU. This one, I believe it's telling the story of two sisters and kind of their relationship with their mother as well, I want to say. This one, again, we get dual timeline. And so one of the times it's taking place in the early 2000s, and then the other one we go back to 1920s through 1940s. And I want to say Russia, could be wrong there, but I believe that is the timeline that we are kind of following. So this is one that I definitely want to get to. It says that we are alternating between the past and the present, and the two sisters will finally hear the singular, harrowing story of their mother's life, and what they learn is a secret so terrible and terrifying that it will shake the very foundation of their family and change who they believe they are. So that, I mean, that little blurb alone has me very intrigued, so I can't wait to check this one out. Definitely let me know if you have. The next one that I have is The Second Mrs. Astor. So this is another one that I have not read yet. This one says it's a mesmerizing novel of historical fiction where it tells the sweeping real-life Titanic love story of Madeline Force, who became the teenage bride of one of the world's richest men and triumphed over tragedy and heartache. So this is following real-life people. So in here, I know that Madeline was married to John Jacob Astor, who was the wealthiest man, I want to say, at the time. He was kind of like American royalty. And so the newlyweds were returning home from their honeymoon in Egypt. So they're on board the Titanic. Of course, we know what happens there. So I am very intrigued by this one. Definitely let me know if you read this yet. Next up, I have 3 from Alice Hoffman, so we will get into them. So all 3 of these books are part of her Practical Magic family and world. Actually, these 3 are all available on Kindle Unlimited, but Practical Magic, the book that these all center around, is not, which I find is very interesting. But funnily enough, all of these are actually my favorites in the whole series. Like Practical Magic itself, I didn't really love, but these books I loved more. So if you're not familiar with Practical Magic, whether through the book or through the iconic movie, then basically this is following a family of witches in kind of contemporary times. And so that's kind of all you need to know, I guess. And so in this one, this is Magic Lessons. This is actually a prequel. There's a couple prequels to Practical Magic. So this one takes us all the way back to the 1600s and kind of the beginning of the Owens family with their matriarch Maria Owens. So this one says, an unforgettable novel that traces a centuries-old curse to its source. We follow Maria Owens, accused of witchcraft in Salem, and the matriarch of the Owens family, featured in Practical Magic. So it kind of goes into it. I love this whole series and family overall. The way these women have gone through a ton and just all their connections throughout the years, just really love the way that this whole series is kind of like woven together. So yeah, this is Magic Lessons, the first, I guess technically in the time period, the first book in the story. So then the next one in the series is The Rules of Magic. This one actually takes us to the 1960s, and again we're following the Owens family, and so this is another prequel to the Practical Magic. So in this one, I believe we're following the parents of the 2 daughters from Practical Magic. So this one, like I said, takes place in the 1960s, and I loved this one as well. Like honestly, all of these prequels are my favorites in the series. And then the last one in the series is The Book of Magic, and so this one is actually a sequel to Practical Magic. So this one takes place after the Practical Magic, and so this one says that the Owens family has been cursed in love for more than 300 years, but all of that is about to change. This one says that the novel begins in a library, which is the best place for a story to be conjured, when one of the family members hears the Death Watch beetle and knows they only have 7 days to live. And so the curse is already at work, and it is a frantic attempt to save somebody's life that spurs 3 generations of the Owens women to use their unusual gifts to break the curse as they travel from Paris to London to the English countryside, where their ancestor, Maria Owens, first practiced the unnamed art. So I love in this book how it just kind of brings the whole family back together. together. So if you want historical fiction with kind of like witchery and magic, highly recommend this series. Like I said, these 3 books are actually my favorites from the Practical Magic series, and they're all on Kindle Unlimited, which is great. All right, next up is Hester by Lori Lico Albanese, I believe. And so this one is on Kindle Unlimited as well. I read this one a couple years ago when it came out. It was, I want to say, a book of the month choice. That's how I read it. This is basically a fictionalized kind of reimagining of the women who had inspired Nathaniel Hawthorne to write The Scarlet Letter. And so I love this very like feminist, women-focused story, kind of these like classic tales that we know. So in this one, we start off in Scotland and we're following this heroine throughout her kind of whole life. We see her as a child and kind of become a young adult, and her family as well. She also has synesthesia, which is basically a person who experiences multiple sensory responses when only one sense has been stimulated. So in this story, she experiences graphemia, in which letters are associated with color, and chromesthesia, in which sound evokes experience of color, shape, and texture. Since, of course, this was not known at the time that the story takes place, because this takes place in the early 19th century, the character herself, like, nobody knew what was going on with her. So in this one, we see that the heroine kind of goes through a lot of things in her life. She loses her mother when she's a young child. So when she's 18, she's married off to this 30-year-old like apothecary in the town who is a widower. And so we kind of see her forced into this role in her life. And she is a seamstress. And so we see how she kind of uses the abilities that I talked about she already has. And she uses that kind of in her needlework. So in this, we see her heading to Salem with her husband, and she ends up kind of befriending Nathaniel Hawthorne, who is there trying to write his book at the time. So I really like the different times and places that we get in this book. Like, we first start off in Scotland and eventually we move to Salem. So I like seeing the heroine over time really start to stand up for herself and learn how to support herself, and just kind of that whole feminist approach, like I said, to kind of these tales. This takes place, which I didn't say, is in the 1800s, and so I just really liked that strength of character, that strength of family, and how much a lot of these women in her past have kind of influenced her life, and it kind of goes from there. So if you like historical fiction, kind of like with a reimagining, retelling, so to speak, of a classic, like how The Scarlet Letter came to be, this book is definitely that. All right, and then the last one on my list to talk about today is Beyond the Moon by Catherine Taylor. So I recently read this one, and this one is a World War I historical fiction, and it also has time travel with it. I will say this one has some heavy content warnings, so just know that going in. It really dives deep into the World War I, the like horrific violence, and kind of some war scenes being played out on page. We also in here get somebody who is forcibly admitted into a psychiatric hospital against their will, so just know all of those things before diving in. This one, like I said, it's a time travel, so in here we start off and it's World War I. We're following the hero, who is a lieutenant, and you see that he's been injured from the war, and so he was taken out of the front line from France. So he's now back in England at a military hospital trying to heal up. He also has temporarily lost his sight due to some of the war wounds, and so he kind of has that going on, and then like, of course, early signs of, well, what we know now is PTSD and war trauma. He's going through that as well, which of course at the time they didn't know that, and things are definitely misdiagnosed. Some treatments are not things that would happen today, let's just put it like that. And so he is going through that. It's 1916. We then cut to the heroine story, and it is 2016, 2017. There's like a 100-year gap in the story. So she is recently grieving the loss of her grandmother, who she was really close to, and she is drowning her sorrows with alcohol. So she ends up stumbling and falling off these cliffs, and she is found by some doctors of a nearby hospital, which of course is the same hospital that the hero is at 100 years in the past. And so they find her, and the hospital has now been turned into a psychiatric hospital. So they find her and assume that she was trying to end her life, because these cliffs are notorious for people jumping, as well as she has depression in her history and just the things she was going through. She was drunk at the time, and so they assume she was trying to harm herself. And so they're like, we're going to forcibly admit you into the psychiatric hospital against your will. So it goes from there, and one night she is kind of wandering around the hospital. She's in one of the wards where it seems abandoned and kind of shut down, and when she goes there, she ends up kind of slipping through time, goes back 100 years, and she sees the hero, and he can hear her because he has lost his sight, and so they start to form this connection through time, and you kind of see both of their stories playing out. So like I said, definitely some heavier content in here, but if you want a World War I time travel, this one is definitely that. All right, so those are the 15 historical fiction recommendations that I have for you today that are on Kindle Unlimited. I feel like half of those are also available with the KU Read and Listen feature, which means you get the audiobook with them, so love that. Highly recommend checking that out. I definitely want to do more of these in the future. The more historical fictions I read and see are also on KU, I will definitely do some updated videos as well. If you have any historical fiction recs for me today, definitely let me know, especially if they're on Kindle Unlimited. Drop them in the comments so other people can grab them as well. Like I said, if you missed any of the books that I talked about and want to go back and grab them, they're all listed in the description of the video, the titles and the authors, so definitely check out there as well as my other historical fiction playlist of more historical fiction content. And if you'd rather leave me an emoji in the comments today to let me know that you you watch this video, leave me a cloud emoji since my sweatshirt has clouds on it, so definitely do that. And if you haven't done so yet, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!